If you could explain a little bit what food noise is and what that's all about.
There's like a toddler that's living in your head and it's like, excuse me, like, hello. And it's just like this incessant noise in the background.
How would one know if they are to the point where they need to seek some sort of professional care? How does shame play into this whole cycle?
We're also like taught that you will feel better about yourself if you look a certain way. And so we might feel ashamed or shameful about any number of things, but we might think, aha, the solution is if I change my body. If the body or food isn't actually the problem, I could spend all day and night for years trying to fix that. But because that's not the problem, I'm never gonna have a solution. We've touched on this, but they're not really about food. All of those behaviors are a representation of something else. So if I eat this or if I don't eat this, then everything will fall apart.
Hi, everyone. I want to introduce my guest today, Sarah Burney. She specializes in treating all types of eating disorders, acute and complex trauma, substance abuse, obsessive compulsive disorder, and depressive or anxiety disorders. She is also a former director of one of the nation's largest and leading adult eating disorder treatment centers. Thank you, Sarah, for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Eating disorders is something that I'm not so super familiar with, so I'm very grateful that you're here today. One of the first questions that I have is a phrase that I had learned fairly recently, which is called food noise. If you could explain a little bit what food noise is and what that's all about.
Sure. I mean, the term came to more popular usage more recently. I think a lot with the GLP-1s. I mean, it's not that it wasn't there before, but it became much more popular then. This like noise in your head that's constantly there of like, oh, I want to eat this, or am I hungry here? Or what about this? Like just like this background noise. The way that I sometimes describe it with clients is it's almost like there's like a toddler that's living in your head and it's like, excuse me, like, hello. And it's just like this incessant noise in the background. You don't notice it if you have a toddler, then you don't even notice how much they're nagging you all the time until they're not nagging you all the time.
Yeah, it becomes so automatic. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I think many listeners would relate to the aspect of stress eating, comfort food, that sort of thing. So how would you describe or summarize stress and, emotional regulation affecting how we eat?
Well, in general, there's a chemical aspect to it, right? Especially depending on the type of food. So you actually do get various neurotransmitters, whether it's dopamine, whatever it may be, that will increase or spike depending on the food that you're eating. So will naturally the like addictive part of it, if that's the term people like to use, can be there specifically because you're almost looking for that dopamine hit. Then there's another and that's just like a biological level. Then there's another aspect of like people often use food as a way to self-soothe, not just because it's like an addiction, the addiction piece, which of course you could argue is also self-soothing. That's a separate discussion though. But the aspect of the self-soothing being like, okay, now people can do it in all kinds of ways. It can be, okay, I finished everything, now I've earned this, right? Or I almost like need some type of distraction. And this like almost like grazing type thing is a distraction. It's almost like you're like doing something to keep your mind, it ultimately keeps your mind away from what it doesn't want to focus on. Now, typically we're not that aware that that's what's going on, right? It's just like we have these cravings. Or I just like want something, but nothing sounds good. Or I'm just like still in the kitchen. And I have no idea why. It kind of presents more like that. But there's an aspect that people do that because it's like they're the chemical level and they're actually just like seeking those dopamine hits. And then there's an aspect where it's like there's almost like an avoidance or self-soothing level.
That's so relatable about the scenarios described, like, kind of bored, what should I eat? Or from my own personal experience, I know in my early 20s, going through a lot of stress for, coming out or stress of college, finding a job, I would eat for sure more than what I needed to. And it was almost a situation where I couldn't stop it. Like I knew it was wrong, but then yet it was, as you described, so soothing. So when you describe it as like, okay, there are brain chemicals involved, now that makes me think, oh, okay, so it wasn't just mental. There's also something physiological going on.
For sure. Yeah. And then there's this like habit forming piece too, right? And a lot of times we just don't notice that we're trying to disconnect or avoid in some capacity or soothe our anxiety in some capacity. And it can be all those things.
Now, if someone has been used to the noise their whole life, and like you said, that voice becomes so regular, so constant, how would one know if they are to the point where they need to seek some sort of professional care?
It's really subjective. I like to differentiate like two pieces. One is like if your opinion is that you want support, great. But if we're looking from an objective standpoint of when someone needs more support, my general bar is if it's interfering in your everyday life, whether that be from a medical standpoint or from a psychological standpoint, right?
Okay.
Significant interference in your daily life.
Okay. So from a medical perspective, that could be not eating enough, could be,
Sure. Some form of malnourishment. We don't often think about being malnourished. It comes from certainly being like undernourished, like underweight, but it also you can be malnourished and quote overweight as well. So just the concept of just like there's a version of malnourishment or your body, like medical stability is you're not medically stable.
right. How does shame play into this whole cycle?
I mean, I think it's throughout the cycle, right? Because shame would definitely be almost like initiating it, and then it would also perpetuate it, right? And then there's shame even while you're kind of getting out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that people should feel whatever. It's reasonable to feel like makes sense to feel ashamed. It makes sense how we got to feeling shameful, right? But that doesn't mean that people actually like if we're grounded in reality, right? That it makes like people need to feel ashamed of it. But it comes either way. The reason that people generally feel ashamed is people feel ashamed when they aren't or guilty when they're not acting in line with their values or society's values, right?
Hmm.
So then we start to like have this sense of like, oh, I am or I'm doing something wrong, right? And so a lot of times people have that in general, and then they might use food as a way to cope, or like trying to manage their body or whatever maybe as a way to cope. We're also like taught that you will feel better about yourself if you look a certain way. And so we might feel ashamed or shameful about any number of things, but we might think, aha, the solution is if I change my body.
Mm.
That's what we're all taught. And so then we can shift what we're actually feeling ashamed about into feeling ashamed about our body and size, whatever it may be. And then we can focus on that. And then it becomes this like never ending cycle. The reason it like stays never ending a lot of the time, in my opinion, is we're saying, I'm going to reduce my shame if I look this way or if I do this with my body or food. But if the body or food isn't actually the problem, I could spend all day and night for years trying to fix that. But because that's not the problem, I'm never gonna have a solution. So let's for an example would be if I ran out of gas in my car and I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put some windshield wiper fluid in. I could do that all day and night, like make sure, like whatever. It's not gonna change the fact that I'm out of gas in my car. Like that isn't the solution. But we think that like, oh, if I just looked like this, if I just controlled my food like this, or then everything would be better. That's not to
Mm.
say that it's not a variable at all. But a lot of times that we actually feel the most shameful about and what's underneath everything is something that isn't actually our food or our body. Not that it doesn't matter, but usually there's more.
Is it fair to say, this might be a leading question, is it fair to say that the body dysmorphia or the opinions about your body or the weight you need to be at or that sort of thing is never the root of it?
It would be that it's like often not. It's not that it's
Okay.
not a factor. It's just that there's usually more.
Okay. So if this is not the root of it and shame leads to a deeper rabbit hole, we're talking about trauma now. What are we talking?
Yeah, a lot of times trauma, just honestly like self-esteem in general, like our own like sense of value in general. People we think that the only thing that matters in us feeling like we have value or esteem, right, is I mean it's a variety of factors. Like whether it be our looks or our job or our income or our like marital status or just where you live, like whatever. You could pick a bunch of things. And so they're all like factors. People tend to put a lot of weight on the like financial end and also like what you look like end. But the reality is there's underneath that, there's just like these core beliefs that we've learned even from growing up from a long time ago, from like our attachments and trauma and things like that. And that really plays into just our narratives about ourselves. Separate from, like, we could check everything off the list of, like, I make a lot of money. I look great. I have, like, whatever the standard is for, like, family life, right? Like, everything's, I'm intelligent. Like, everything is apparently great, but I still feel terrible about myself. Why is that, right? It's because actually I have these other core beliefs that formed from like my attachments when I was young, trauma, whatever it may be, and those are actually the core issues. Now, if I resolve those core issues and I still am acting out of line with my values as it relates to food, body, intelligence, like all of these things, I'm still not going to feel good about myself. So it's not that it's nothing. It's just that it's not everything.
I like that. It might move the needle a little bit, but it's not everything. It's not the
Correct.
deeper wound underneath. So now what we're talking about is we're identifying the wrong beliefs. The belief is, well, I need to look good or be at this certain weight. But what you're saying is there are deeper, hidden, let's say, suppressed beliefs that are actually guiding your behaviors and your
Yeah,
beliefs.
generally speaking, yes. Hmm.
Examples might be, I'm not good enough. I don't belong.
Hmm. Yep, exactly, exactly. There's
Yeah,
something wrong with me. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. This whole idea of eating disorders or, your relationship with food being a coping mechanism. Now, if someone, let's say someone, the listener has been struggling with food noise, dissatisfaction with their weight, their body, their whole life, and they want to actually start to see what professional help might look like. Can you paint a picture of how you work with people and what it might look like? Let's take body dysmorphia for an example. How do you start to shift them from the body as the problem to deeper root core wound beliefs are the problem?
Okay, really quick. This is very like technicality, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Body dysmorphia technically is a different diagnosis altogether. It's a thing, but it's not what you're referring to. I think is negative body image, of just like I am perceiving my body incorrectly and also negatively.
Let's talk about that. I'm glad you pointed that out. So the difference between body perception is what you're saying, what you think about your body versus body dysmorphia. What's the difference there?
Body dysmorphia is a diagnosis in and of itself. So it's a specific diagnosis that you have like certain obsessions, certain ways that you like try to adjust for and adapt because of like what you think is wrong, what you perceive to be wrong, and it causes a marked impairment in your life. So anyway, the colloquial term, like people use the term body dysmorphia, but only because I'm acting as a therapist. I mean, I am a therapist, but in that role here, I just wanted to distinguish um, that technical diagnosis of body dysmorphia, which is not the same as what you're asking me about, I think.
That's a great point.
You're,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes. I definitely, that's where I was coming from. Kind of like how people throw around the word narcissist. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
okay,
exactly. You know, you struggle with some form of negative body image or distorted body image. They're two different things, right? Negative body image, meaning that, like, I think really negatively about my body. Whether it's true or not is an irrelevant point. It's just I have a really negative perception of my body. Okay. Now, distorted body image is that my perception of my body is like actually just incorrect. So I think I'm either bigger or smaller or stronger or weaker than I am. I don't have like a very clear baseline
okay.
or not baseline. I just don't have a clear understanding. People that struggle with disordered eating or eating disorders can have both of these things. And you can seek help for it. Like I said, if it bothers you, then go for it. Now they're for seeking help.
I believe so many people come into acceptance of what their relationship with food is, what their perception is of their body, dissatisfaction, wherever they are in the spectrum on that. And they just become used to it and accept it. If someone wanted to actually make a dent
Okay,
in
this is
their
great.
relationship with themselves, what would that look like if they were to work with you?
Okay, so here's something extremely important. A lot of times we think that if we tell ourselves, hey, I want to improve in this regard, like physically, in whatever capacity, we think that there's an unstated premise. And the unstated premise with that is because I'm not good enough or valuable or lovable if I look this way. I don't agree with that. I want to separate them out. My value and innate worth as a human being is not linked to what my body looks like. I'm lovable whether I look like this or like this. I'm deserving of love and belong regardless. Also, I happen to want to like feel comfortable in my body and confident, whatever that means for me. And I have to keep in mind that feeling comfortable or looking this way doesn't mean that innately I'm more lovable. Now, that said, people in society treat us differently depending on how we look. So I'm going to be treated as if I'm more lovable or I'm more less lovable depending on how I look. And I don't like pretending that that's not the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually think it's offensive to say like, no, it doesn't matter. But actually, if I'm going out living my life, people treat me differently depending on how I look. So to tell me that that isn't what's happening, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So it is happening. However, that doesn't, what I want to keep in mind, and I have to like realize that reality, whether I think that's right or not is a separate point. Whether it's right or not that people treat me differently based on how I look, that's a separate discussion, but that's not the discussion we're having. What the discussion we're having is, does this occur? And it does. Now, what I want to keep in mind is that although that occurs, that doesn't mean that my innate worth and value and belonging is contingent upon my looks. It's very easy to get mixed up because how could you not think if someone is treating me better and likes me more, like literally likes me more because or is interested in talking to me or giving me a job or whatever maybe because I look a certain way, how am I not supposed to connect the dots to looking this way means I'm more lovable and belonging when literally I belong because of how I looked, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we have to do a lot of work around the core beliefs of our like natural state of belonging and lovability and how we might belong in a specific group because of our like intelligence or in some cases what we look like or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that innately as a person, right? That like because of this now we're lovable. It's like if I have a PhD from I don't know some like Ivy League school, I'm going to be able to go to certain events or certain like have certain job opportunities or whatever it may be. That doesn't mean that I'm like more lovable. It means that I'm qualified for that because of that. It has nothing to do with my innate sense of worth and value. It has to do with my value as like if I'm a professor or something like that, because that's specifically I've done this to achieve this, which equals this value.
Yeah, it's like we're now getting and deconstructing the formula for people's self-worth and to stop the conversation at, oh, now I look a certain way, self-worth check, like
Right.
on
The
off.
thing is, if that worked, then once you look that way, you'd be delighted and happy. But the crazy thing is, people look a certain way and they finally get to where they always wanted to be and they're not delighted and happy. So, like, why?
Mm,
It's because we're fixing the wrong That's not the problem.
yeah, the ultimate litmus. So once you
Yeah.
get to where you want to be, and which also brings up the benefit or the value of always striving to be something. Because what happens when you achieve XYZ? Then now, as you just said, now you have to sit with yourself and other areas of your life that are still not quote unquote perfect. And here you are back at square one. So the distraction itself is such a valuable thing.
Right. People use, like, I'm going to focus, people would rather focus on these more external things a lot of the time because a lot of the time that's more comfortable and even like easier in some way, although it can be miserable than looking at the real issue. And that like assumes a level of awareness that there is another issue. So there's like a lot of layers here. But
Yeah.
to answer your original question, what we want to do is we can both strive for improvement in whatever it is that we value. So whether it be scholastically or like family life or looks wise, that can be one thing. That doesn't have to be bad or wrong. I don't have to just accept that, like, well, I'm not how I want to be, but like, oh well, I should love myself no matter what. Yeah, you should love yourself no matter what. And also that doesn't like that's a completely separate point. Like, I don't know why we don't need to conflate the two. You are lovable no matter what, and also you can also strive to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah. And back to your example of the PhD, if you're a PhD and you're published and all these things and you think, oh, wow, you're really accomplished, successful, good enough in this one area. It's like, oh yeah, but I don't look a certain way, or I'm still dissatisfied with myself. Being able to, I don't know if compartmentalize is a good word to use. I don't know if we ever want to encourage people to compartmentalize, but being able to at least acknowledge this aspect of yourself that is good enough or good at least,
That's right.
really allows a person to be able to deconstruct this whole relationship with food. Like, where are you actually looking?
Yeah, and we want to acknowledge when we're struggling with food, if something's making us unhappy, to be like, I should just learn to just like tolerate it. Like sometimes that can be the case, but sometimes you don't actually have to learn to tolerate it. Like why? Like
Hmm.
if I had a leaky pipe in my house, I'm like, it's just like life's hard, just tolerate it. But I can have a plumber come and fix it, like objectively no real problem or cost to me. Like why would I not do that?
Hmm. Yeah. So you're encouraging people to,
Yeah, like strive. It does, but not because you're unworthy or unlovable if you don't, but just because it makes the most sense to act in line with what my values are. And like I can value not having pipes that leak in my house.
yeah,
I can know that if I do, it doesn't mean that I'm a terrible person or that I'm not lovable or anything like that. But like I still like would prefer that my pipes don't leak in my house.
yeah. So what we're helping people do or encouraging people to do is number one, the deep belief that you're working with of I'm not satisfied with how I look may not be the ultimate endpoint. Could be something deeper, such as what is your self-esteem based on? What are your core beliefs below that, such as I'm not good enough just across the board? And then being able to work on different aspects of your life to help build up your sense of self.
Yeah, and there's a thought experiment you can do with this, right? Of like, why does it matter so much to me to look this way? Oh, it's kind of like a Socratic thought experiment of like, or to be like this, right? It's like, okay, well, because then I'll feel good about myself. Okay, why? Well, because then like people will like me more. Oh, okay. So if I look this way, then I'm going to belong. So if you don't look this way, then what? Well, then I don't belong. Okay, so we're worried about not belonging. So like, there's an aspect of that that's true, like potentially true. Like you're rejected from certain people or things like if you don't look a certain way. And also, even if you did look that way and those people did accept you, would you still think that you're not belonging?
Mm, yeah, that's a great
This is where we
litmus.
get into this like idea of like it's almost like I mean, people do this. This is a different direction, but people do this in relationships. Like, how come anything this person does for me just isn't enough? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm this like endless pit of just like need reassurance all day and night. Because like it's hard for me to like actually hold that on my own. Like the actual issue is I don't feel deserving of love and belonging. I don't feel like I actually am someone who ever can be like deeply loved for who they are. And so you can tell me all day and night, show me all day and night till like you're I guess blue in the face doesn't work there, but all day and night and it won't be enough because I have this core belief that I learned completely separate from my relationship with you that I'm just no matter what anyone does, the reality is I'm not lovable. And so it can be that I don't look perfect. That's why. And like I do everything I possibly can to like look a certain way and I still don't like myself. It can present that way. It can be that like my partner or my friends do all these things for me and it's just never enough. I still feel just like they don't love me, but it's not because or like I don't belong. And it's not in those circumstances, it doesn't have to be because the other party isn't doing enough or I haven't done enough to look how whatever perfect is. It's because I have this separate core belief, and no matter what, I have to address that core belief.
Yeah. So once again, it's providing a very convenient distraction method or coping mechanism to avoid sitting with those actual core beliefs.
hmm And most of the time, people will argue with you about that being their core belief because logically, they know that that's not true. So a lot of times people are like, I don't believe that because logically they know, of course I'm lovable. Of course, like this isn't the entirety of me. But just because logically I know something, that doesn't mean that on a more emotional level, right? And a more visceral level, that that's what I believe.
Yeah. And create a lot of internal confusion,
Yes,
anxiety. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that perspective because it's so universal and it goes way beyond eating disorders and
sure.
your relationship with food and your relationship with your perception of your body. I have another question for you, and that is, what are some beliefs, maybe colloquially, we already uncovered one of my own, of lumping in body dysmorphia with negative body image or,
Mm.
body's distortions. What are other beliefs about eating disorders, anything related to it, that you wish more people knew?
There is a distinction between disordered eating and eating disorders. Disordered eating, most people have somewhat disordered eating. It can be like they have like some food rules here and there. They just like, it's a little odd based on whatever the society's standard of like normal is. That doesn't mean it's the same as an eating disorder. An eating disorder has specific criteria obviously behaviorally, and then from a functioning standpoint, it causes significant impairment in your daily life, right? So I might have disordered eating, but it just like it might be annoying to me, but it's not like significant or marked impairment, right? It doesn't decrease my ability to function and interfere with my like in a variety of ways. So that's one thing to know. Another thing is as it relates to eating disorders, we've touched on this, but they're not really about food. I mean, that's all your head thinks about is like food or your body or whatever. Maybe I guess or exercise or purging, whatever. But it has like really what's happening is those behaviors, that eating, that exercise or lack thereof, that like all those behaviors are a representation of something else. So it's more like if I eat this or if I don't eat this, then everything will fall apart. And it has nothing to do with like I have an association that like eating this banana, right? Me is going to lead to like I'm going to actually feel super unsafe, super out of control. Everything's going to fall apart. And there's a few steps in between that because logically you're like, that makes no sense. Our brains in eating disorder brain, there's like steps before that, but that's like one of the ways. So it's just, even though it appears that like we're very obsessed with not eating something like toast or a banana or something like that, it actually just isn't about that. It's what that banana or behavior represents. And it's
Hmm.
again linked to more of like your sense of self, generally speaking.
Once again, all roads lead to sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
And this makes sense because as human beings, we are designed, obviously, we want to survive. That's like normal human instinct. So if we want to survive, like we need a sense of self, like a strong sense of self.
yeah,
So
yeah.
everything's going to lead back. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, kind of along the lines of that is people who are with people who struggle with this inner dialogue or with behaviors where maybe from another person's point of view, this person isn't that functional. Maybe the person thinks they're perfectly functional, but another person, a family member, a parent might weigh in on this
Mm-hmm.
person and give their opinions about someone who they see is struggling with the relationship with food. I know for me growing up, when I was in college, my mother would make many comments about my weight. In her defense, I had gained about like 40 pounds. And, but what would you say to those who are trying to support loved ones? My mother was very much of the opinion that, well, no, I do need to tell them that they're overweight because otherwise, they won't know. They don't see themselves. So what is your advice to those who want to support loved ones?
It depends on your relationship, I guess, with them and their history. But usually I like to start, especially if it's a sensitive topic, of like, hey, I have something as it relates to like food, body image to discuss with you. Is that okay?
Ask for
Because
permission.
just assuming exactly. And if they're in like a like severe concern place, then whether they want to have the discussion or not, like as your loved one, I'm gonna have this discussion with you. But so I will assume that that's not what we're discussing, right? I'll just like put that as like a separate thing. But so if it's someone that you're just like noticing a shift, it's nothing that it's like a dire, like severe concern, but more like, hey, if I were in their shoes, I would want someone to bring this to my attention, even though it might be uncomfortable. Then I would just say like, hey, like, are you open to us having a discussion about some like food or body image stuff? And then probably be confused, like, what? No, why? Or I yes. I mean, we can talk about it later. I don't know what's going on, and this is the later discussion. I have no idea what's actually going on, but there's a few things that I've been noticing. And so I'm here to just bring like that on the table and see how I can support you. Because I noticed that you're doing A, B, and C, and your mood seems to be A, B, and C. So I don't know what to make of this.
I like that. It's a very
It's like
curious,
exploratory.
yes, exploratory. Yeah. Yeah. And gives them a chance to give their perspective, weigh in.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very inviting way to
Yeah.
open the subject for sure.
Because we're not the experts on them.
Mhm. Especially when we're talking about inner experience and, some of the deeper beliefs and how one's sense of self and self-esteem is formed, what it's based on. We may not have a clue of what's really
Right. Mm-hmm.
contributing to that. Yeah. Okay. Well, as a final thought, if you could give a message to anyone who's feeling consumed, perhaps, by food thoughts, obviously you've given the structure, the roadmap of what it looks like to start to work with, these kinds of challenges. But any message that you'd like to give to anyone who's struggling, perhaps?
Well, if you do want to reach out for help, I'm obviously biased in this regard, but I do think that it's really important to find someone who genuinely specializes in whether it's eating disorders or disordered eating. I say genuinely because it's very easy to like check a box that you specialize in something, but there's a lot of narratives and beliefs that, clinicians accidentally import to their clients. And like, so we don't know, but there's a lot of ways in which clinicians can guide people kind of not in the direction that is going to be best for their healing. So I very much recommend finding someone who actually is a specialist in that field, if no matter what it is that you're like seeking help for, right?
Yeah, great point. And I absolutely do not specialize in eating disorders. So even the dangers of that, of just not understanding, the terms that are just thrown out willy-nilly and how that
Yeah.
can make an impact on a person. All right. Well, I have a couple questions, more fun questions that I like to ask guests.
Great.
Okay. If you had to give a TED talk on anything other than therapy or eating disorders in particular, what would it be?
Okay, two options. Either I would do something more like spirituality, or I would do more like weightlifting because I find both of those things very interesting.
Oh, weightlifting. All
Yeah.
right. Specifically like nutrition or, uh,
Not nutrition. I don't know enough. I mean, I obviously would have to study, but I mean, I could, but there's just so many aspects. So it wouldn't be specifically that, but more about like how our body, obviously nutrition is a factor in it, but like adapts to just different stressors. So I guess it ends up being more like therapeutic no matter what I do, um, but adapts to different stressors and the influence that that can also have on us, like chemically and our just like overall well-being.
yeah. And
Quite fascinating.
you personally, you spend a lot of effort and time on nurturing like your physical self, like
Yeah,
lifting
because I
weights.
want to like feel like my body works.
Yeah, for sure. And also, one last question. What's a recent purchase? Maybe something either cheap, like a $20 purchase, $30 purchase that changed your life.
Mm. Hmm. Okay, well, it's not a cheap purchase, but what changes my life is when I have the like privilege, I guess, of being able to travel with my like family and friends. And even if we go to the same place over and over again, like whatever it may be, like that is always life changing. And so experiences really. My like purchases of like items is not particularly life changing, although I like sometimes would like to tell myself it is. It's just not. It's really the experiences I have with people that I love and care about.
Yeah, getting back to that sense of belonging, which also
Right.
contributes to your sense of self.
Hmm.
People a lot of times think that they need to be an island and I'm going to be like self-love and I just need to be able to love myself and then I'll be fine. It's like, well, we're human beings. We need connection and how we
Right.
relate to others is a big piece of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Sarah. Well,
Hmm.
thank you very much. If people want to work with you, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, you are licensed in California, Arizona, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. So you could take
Yes.
clients from any of these states and
Yes.
you have a practice. If you want to contact Sarah or someone from her team, you can go to Burney, Bunrey, BurneyTherapyGroup.com. And there's a phone number there.
Buney. Uh,
Oh, whatever I said, it's Burney, BurneyTherapyGroup, one word.com. Yeah,
yep.
forget what I said earlier. And
Right.
and yes, and you are taking new clients?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm super grateful and humbled to be able to be a guest on your podcast. I
Of
love
course.
hearing
Yeah.
from you and learning with you.